The obsession with winning and status and specialness and getting attention is all part of the underbelly. To be ordinary would be to lose those necessary and protective grandiose defenses. And then the narcissistic person has to sit in the nihilistic state of discomfort and shame. Ever been in a situation when the narcissistic person you're with actually thinks that they are the catch? Let's talk about this dynamic. I mean, it shouldn't be that surprising that they walk around thinking that they're the catch. So here's a short answer. If anyone ever self-refers to themselves as being a catch, that's a red flag. Healthy, self-aware people don't do that. Now, you may have healthy self-esteem and self-appraisal, and you know that you're a good person, you know that you're a good supportive partner, but you don't walk around thinking of yourself as a catch. That's something that's a little bit more narcissistic-y. Now listen, it is not unusual for the narcissistic person to think that they, of course, are the catch, that they were the big get, that they're oh so desirable to other people. It's the unfettered and almost delusional grandiosity that narcissistic people maintain, and it's that delusional grandiosity that's talking. They kind of really believe it, and misbelief actually sets the foundation for the devaluation that will come in this relationship. So where does this all come from for them? Why do they think they're the catch? Well, it's the insecurity, right? The challenge with narcissistic folks is that when we know that what's fueling a lot of what they're about is their insecurity, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It gives a lot of explanatory heft as to why they are the way they are, but at the same time, it also fuels the trauma-bonded justifications that are why we get stuck. Oh, they're insecure, right? Narcissistic people are caught in a perpetual catch-22 when they are in relationships. The grandiose defenses are a protection against their insecure core. For the narcissistic person, they want someone who is all that, right? They want a partner who is great in terms of whether it's on the basis of appearance or their accomplishments or their social status, whatever that is. But that is because that's what they feel entitled to, and it helps them feel good and important. But the problem is when the partner that they pursue or that they get is really all that, then the narcissistic person is consumed with that fear of rejection and abandonment. Because the more you are as their partner, the greater the power you have, I guess. They cannot tolerate that sort of lack of power or loss of power in a relationship. So they make up stories in their own mind, and they sell themselves on the grandiose belief that they are the catch. It is intolerable for them to cognitively know that they are punching above their weight class with you. So even if you are all that and then some, the best, the mostest, whatever it is, they will have to mentally make you smaller in their mind and in the things that they say about you. So they will say nonsensical things about how they are the one who is the catch. And they will provide complex rationalizations for why they are the catch, or they might even provide downright fabrications. Things like, I could have had anyone and I chose you. That kind of BS. Now this gets really messy if for some reason the narcissistic person does actually have greater social status. For example, they may make more significantly more money, or they have more notoriety, or they have whatever form of greater social status they have, or they're way more attractive. They may actually pursue partners who ostensibly do have lower social status, because then the relationship already has the built-in power differential. Maybe their partner, the narcissistic person's partner, has the one thing they want. For example, the way they look, or that they're much younger, or whatever the thing is. But otherwise, there would be a big difference. And again, that idea of, aren't I the catch? He, she, they're lucky to have me. The narcissistic person has to believe that they are the catch. Because if they don't, then that means you have the power to abandon and kind of psychologically eviscerate them. And that anxiety that they could be rejected is either turned into rage because of the shame of the thought of, what if I'm not the catch? that may percolate up for them from time to time, or into grandiosity, and they double down on the idea of being the catch. So listen, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. You are in a relationship with them, and with a narcissistic person, it's a long game of indoctrination. So regardless of who is the alleged catch in a relationship, this relationship is a hot, cold, gaslighted mess that may slowly solidify into a trauma-bonded mess where you consistently justify and rationalize. And as they say nonsense about how they are the catch, the gaslighting will destabilize you enough, and it becomes plausible that they may be the catch, and then you may have internalized their projections and fears about being rejected and abandoned. This is, of course, an even more pronounced and difficult cycle if the narcissistic person actually is bringing something to the table. So if they actually do have their big, fat, fancy job, or are super attractive, or has something that publicly sort of gives them catch status. But the narcissistic person will actually say this stuff about being a catch in public and imply that they are this so-called catch. And it kind of seems like they mean it. And so if you even have a shred of your own insecurity, it can play on that deeply. Healthy, well put together people do not walk around thinking of themselves as catches. Right off the bat, if someone self-identifies as a catch, that's a red flag. If you meet someone who is posturing as the catch, instead of questioning yourself, take it in as the warning that it is. Listen, if you want to view it from a catch model, we are all catches, right? If you're a decent human being, you're a catch. But that is not what the narcissistic person means. And if they ever view you as the person who is lucky that you got them, look alive. It is not a good sign. What happens when you hold a narcissistic person publicly accountable? Well, it's in line with what folks like Emerson said, that if you're going to strike the king, you better kill him. Because that's the fantasy. You will call them out, and others will see it, and the narcissistic person can no longer hide, and others will see what you are up against, and that the narcissistic person or organization may face some real consequences. For many people, it's the moment that wish would happen in the name of closure and of justice. Accountability is very, very difficult for narcissistic people. It is against their nature and their capabilities to own it, because that shatters this perception of themselves as perfect. So to admit wrong or error or something that is not ideal means that they have to publicly show themselves as not perfect, which is sort of literally intolerable for a narcissistic person. But what really happens when you attempt to hold a narcissistic person accountable? Number one, it may be a declaration of war. This may be the most bold thing you could ever do with a narcissistic person, because not only are you calling them out, you are doing it in a public way, which multiplies the shame for them about 1,000-fold. So to do something that is already quite triggering for a narcissistic person who already is quite thin-skinned, and to do it with a shame multiplier is big. And that means that whomever is viewed as the instigator of this public call for accountability is the enemy. And whomever is responsible for this public call for accountability is going to be hit with endless rage, punishment, and vindictiveness. And let me tell you, they ain't gonna let up. And this takes us to point 2. They will commit to revenge against whomever is attempting to hold them accountable. And they may be willing to sit on it for a long time until they have the pieces in position to really bring you down. For how impulsive narcissistic people are, they can actually really play a long game when it comes to revenge. They may ruminate about how you've done them wrong for years, and the vindictiveness may come out in other ways in the interim. For example, they may stop speaking to you. They may share lies about you with other people. I'm going to be talking about smear campaigns next. But they will come for you. And this can take months or even years. And heaven forbid if the narcissistic person that you attempted to bring to public accountability actually loses something. For example, they lose their power or their job, but even double heaven forbid they get that job back again. I promise you, they will find a way to make you pay. And third, this of course relates to the smear campaign. The narcissistic person who has been held publicly accountable is not going down quietly. You're going down with them. And they're going to tell as many people as they can, even publicly, how bad you are. Sometimes, when people do hold the narcissistic person accountable, they find that the smear campaign that they are subjected to winds them up in as bad a position as the narcissistic person is now after being held accountable for something bad that they really did. Sadly, even when a narcissistic person is held accountable, they will still have lots of supporters and flying monkeys who are still in their thrall and may believe what is being said about you or the other person or other people trying to hold them accountable. Number 4, they will play the victim. They will claim it was all a witch hunt or a conspiracy and may even make a big public show of how they are going to seek out help or go away for a while, or my favorite is spend time with their family. Sometimes the narcissistic person cannot slide out from the public accountability, and they will almost never really cop to it, but they will play the victim and spin the narrative that people have always been out to get them and the truth will come out. Now, sometimes a publicist or other crisis management cleanup team may try to play on the idea of humility and have the narcissistic person go into a treatment center or claim that they want to spend time with their family and make it look like the narcissistic person is going to be contrite for a while until the accountability demands quiet down. And 5th, they will bring other people down with them, something I've been hinting at all along. They are not going down alone. So the people who may have been loyal to the narcissistic person or helped them or just have been their loyal enablers and emboldeners may actually go down with the narcissistic person or in some cases instead of the narcissistic person. If you try to hold the narcissistic person accountable, the narcissistic person may take one of these loyal people who stands by them and turn them into their human shield or put the blame on them. And then there's number 6. If you try to hold them accountable, they may succumb to despair, depression, or even self-harm. This can happen especially with more vulnerable narcissistic folks. The narcissistic person who is forced to make a public apology or public acknowledgement, or is called out publicly, may not be able to manage the shame, and we may see them crash and collapse. They may become depressed and despairing. They may turn to drugs or alcohol. They may even engage in self-harming and dangerous behavior. This kind of public call-out, depending on the scale and the issue, may be intolerable. And at those times, real clinical intervention for the person being brought to accountability is necessary. And this rock bottom can be quite profound. Number 7, the narcissistic person, when being held accountable may actually face real consequences. In some cases, this accountability may be quite severe, and there may be investigations, arrests, loss of assets, loss of an important relationship. They may lose their home, their business, their title, or even be arrested. This tends not to be the case. It is amazing how Teflon most narcissistic people can be, especially if you're talking about something smaller scale. The narcissistic person is called out and held publicly accountable for, I don't know, parking in the wrong parking spot. But in bigger ticket issues, this can happen, but not often. And interestingly, lots of folks will say, I didn't want them to get into this much trouble. I just wanted them to be called out and take some real responsibility. Sadly, in many cases, real heavy, meaningful consequences are often the only way that happens. You may be thinking, okay, Dr. Ramani, I'm clear. All of these things or some of these things could happen, and I still intend to publicly call them out. Okay, so now a few more things to keep in mind. Number one is safety. Depending on the narcissistic person, if it's more severe, this could be violence or at least really scary. So if you're going to do this, make sure you have a safety plan of some kind, and not just in the short term, but for longer, depending on the situation. Number two, have your legal ducks in line, because like I said, they are coming after you. They will try all kinds of legal angles: slander, libel, defamation. They may bring up old issues of yours. And even if they don't have a legal leg to stand on, one of the many problems with the legal system in the United States, at least, is that when someone starts doing this to you, then you have to be able to defend against it. And that means hiring an attorney, which is expensive and will cost you lots of money that you do not have. And it is also very unsettling to have to go through this. Narcissistic people are ferocious, litigious, legalistic, and are like a dog with a bone, and the most of the rest of us are not. The third thing to keep in mind is you have to have proof, or make sure you have other people willing to go on the record with you. We're back to Emerson and the King. You need evidence. And even with evidence, bringing a narcissistic person to accountability will be challenging. And there is strength in numbers. Most of the public accountability we've seen around, especially public scandals with narcissistic folks, had legs only because there was more than one person doing the call out. And the clearer the proof, photo, video, email, text, financial records, then you may be able to go farther with it in a believable way. But all the other stuff about risk and revenge, even if you have the evidence, that all applies. When you call a narcissistic person out publicly, be aware that it probably will not go down the way you think. And your life, it's not like you're going to feel like, oh, I feel so much better, this monkey's off my back. Your life's actually going to become more difficult. I don't say that so that you don't do it, but that you prepare if you're going to do it. Believe it or not, some people may think that you are the petty one for wanting to call a narcissistic person out publicly. Like, why can't you just let go of it? So that can also feel like adding insult to injury. And the dream and the hope that A, they may actually cop to it and take responsibility if they're called out publicly, or B, that they will face real, meaningful consequences, well, that's not likely to pan out. Narcissistic people are a lot more glib than the rest of us and are able to turn things around onto other people, even when there's evidence of their wrongdoing. And some of you may think, this isn't worth it. Enough of my life has been turned upside down by this relationship. I'm not sure I have the stomach to sit around and wait around vigilantly for their revenge. Listen, only you know what you can or can't endure or what you have the stomach for. I know me, I am not built for revenge waiting. I made the mistake one time with one malignant narcissist around public accountability. I endured months of some of the most terrifying stalking and legal hassles and fear for my safety. My mental health took a massive nosedive. This guy never faced a single consequence and is still living his best abusive life. After that, not only did I cut off from him, but every single person who knew him, and I never engaged with that entire group again, which was a big part of my social support network, so I lost that too. And I know others who go in deep and take the hits because they feel that they couldn't live with themselves otherwise, unless they brought this person to accountability. You can only do what you can tolerate. You just need to know the risks and know yourself, and know, I can guarantee you that this process will not be fair, and most likely the narcissistic person will not face consequences. And then you need to proceed with caution, because folks, no matter how much hurt that has happened here, in many cases, narcissistic behavior, while harmful and hurtful and devastating, it ain't against the law. So here's a question for you. Can narcissistic people be resilient? I'm not gonna lie, I got this idea from a White Lotus episode from a few weeks back. The scene, if you haven't watched the show, the scene was with this very wealthy and kind of awful family, the Ratliff family. And the narcissistic mother, the one with the southern accent, and whose husband, the finance guy, was about to lose everything and was grappling with his own hopelessness. The upshot of it all was that she said that unless she could keep living a comfortable life, that she wouldn't want to live. And that led me to reflect on resilience, or the lack thereof, in narcissistic people. I almost had to give the character some props for her insight, because she's right. She could not have lived without the money and the status and the snobbery and the fancy stuff and the limitless entitled ability to do whatever she wants and never have to work for any of it. She couldn't make it, and she won't make it. And her story would pretty much end when the money ends. So we can kind of see where this is going to go for her after they leave that island. There was no sense of self in her, just a lot of emptiness filled with trappings and status and comfort. And since that character is narcissistic, she assumes that everyone else is wired like her, which is very classical for narcissistic people, and another great example of low empathy, assuming that other people could possibly never have different worldviews or experiences than you. But then that took me to something beyond this ridiculous character on this television show. Can narcissistic people be resilient? It's tricky to answer that, because resilience in and of itself is a tricky word. The actual definition is, and the Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition is, an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. But we often extend it further to mean stuff like flexibility or toughness or even achievement. But resilience, really at the core of it, is the ability to bounce back from misfortune, to be able to keep on keeping on in the face of adversity, especially if that results in a change in circumstance. And when we use that definition, the answer to are narcissistic people resilient, and the answer to that is definitely not. Narcissistic people are not resilient in that way. There's no flexibility. There's very little bounce back. When adversity strikes a narcissistic person, they do not do well. And this is magnified if the adversity results in a loss of status. For example, a loss of a job or power or a relationship or money or a social position. Narcissistic people cannot and will not be able to cope with these situations. Most commonly, the narcissistic person will feel like, and tell anyone who will stand still long enough to hear it, that they're a victim, that life is uniquely unfair to them. Internally, the shame overwhelms the narcissistic person. Their perfect facade gets dented. The idea of them as being perfect gets dented. And above all else, the loss or the change rips through their entitled defenses, and they learn the hardest truth of all, that they are not special. At that point, with a narcissistic person, we will witness a variety of responses: rage, revenge, calling in favors, manipulating people, and telling them that they owe them. The narcissistic person who experiences adversity will have to experience their powerlessness and helplessness. Where you may have been living for years with this powerlessness and helplessness because of this relationship. And narcissistic people simply do not know what to do with that feeling. For a while, they will throw tantrums. And then when it sinks in that there is no fix, the narcissistic person will collapse. And in most cases, actually will not fully recover. The closest the narcissistic person may come to resilience is that they never lose their fight, that they will continue to talk smack about other people, ruminate about everyone who let them down, talk about their glory days. We will sometimes see fallen celebrities do down market D-level reality shows to keep the lights on. And I got to tell you, I kind of respect that. I mean, that might be about as close to narcissistic resilience that we may see. And at least they get lots of attention for it, right? And narcissistic folks can be expert performers and expert show people, if it were. So they will be able to craft a reinvention narrative. And while it may present as something that could look humiliating, some narcissistic folks keep punching and trying to stay relevant. As I said, I do think that that's a sort of resilience. They strangely do keeping on, and they keep getting attention and pitch themselves as a sort of messy kind of hero. But it is definitely not a find meaning and purpose kind of resilience. Or the narcissistic person lives in the past and talks about all the people they know and all the places they've been and the things that they did and the places that they ate. It's sort of a glory days kind of thing. But going back to that idea of collapse, when the narcissistic person has a major fall, loss, or unwanted change or public takedown, many don't come back from it. They may go into hiding. They may look like they have aged 25 years in a week. They may cut off or are cut off from other people and live small lives. Some remain quite bitter, and some may even lose their will to live. And in extreme cases, some may consider to end their own lives. And in fact, I do teach therapists that these big falls are very, very high-risk times with our narcissistic clients, and we have to monitor them very, very carefully for their own safety. It's interesting. Narcissistic people often present as tough, and they may make big ideas into reality seemingly out of nothing. They are fantastical storytellers and big dreamers, and are also willing to bend the rules or the laws to become successful. And as a result, quite often may become quite successful. While most narcissistic people are not, on average, larger-than-life people, many are. So they almost feel too big to fail. That they are just merely difficult people who live big lives and that it will never be any other way. We can't even imagine their demise. And the big life is the narcissistic person's identity. So when that gets taken away or life changes in any way that they lose any of that, narcissistic people cannot go with it because they actually are that status and that stuff and that life. Most narcissistic people suck at humility. And humility is how any of us who may have had or have a spell of good fortune may recognize that it may not always last, and it may not even last for long, or that we are lucky that we are having this moment and to appreciate it. And that if it did all go away, or life took a major change, that we'd still be okay because we'd have to be okay. That's humility. And the lack of humility we observe in narcissistic people may be a major driver of why they are not resilient. And when you throw in the natural rigidity of narcissistic folks, the kind of my way or the highway way of being, you throw that in there with the lack of humility, that equation, low humility plus low flexibility equals no resilience. And it's not just big falls from grace, losing a fortune or losing a big company or being in a public scandal. Sometimes it's the small stuff, the marriage ending, or a business not succeeding as they hoped, or that they age out of their career. And similarly, We see a range of responses, including anger, collapse, revenge, bitterness, but definitely not resilience. You may wonder, really, is anyone graceful or resilient when these big bad things happen? Can a person really be so resilient if they lose so much or everything? Yeah, right now I'm seeing it. I live in Los Angeles. I'm watching thousands of families who literally lost everything in one day be resilient, to heal and recover despite all they went through and continue to go through. They may feel miserable on many days. They do feel miserable on many days, but they keep going and trying and demonstrating extraordinary patience given the circumstances. And I am also watching some narcissistic folks who lost everything in those same fires. And it is painful to observe how they are treating their families and other people close to them. And they are just not able to move forward without lashing out at everyone, as though the fires were targeted specifically at them. And there is no capacity for them to draw together with others or with community or even have empathy for other people's stories. There is a big difference on the responses to this large-scale experience of loss on the basis of personality, but we often don't break it down that way. You know what resilience looks like. You have seen it in people who have lost, like I said, in fires or experienced untimely deaths of people close to them, or illnesses, or chronic medical issues, or a sudden job layoff. I see it in family members whom I'm very close to, and I see it in dear friends. It's not easy, but again, they keep on keeping on, and they still be in the world, and they be empathic, and they grow. These are all people who have experienced severe stresses or losses or shifts in their lives that they did not want. They had periods or period of grief and sadness, and they slowly found a way, despite losing a certain quality of life they once had, or a quality of health, or people they deeply loved and no longer have. All this resilience, it's not really a thing in narcissism, despite the grandiose exteriors and the damn hero worship they get from everyone, despite their grand successes and their big personalities. When it all falls apart, they simply cannot cope. And when all their specialness is taken away, many, if not most, cannot keep going and will often collapse. So next time you think that they are more together than you, think again, especially when real life happens. So let's talk about the underbelly. When we talk about narcissism, and in quick interviews I've done about narcissism, I've been absolutely guilty of this too. We tend to focus on the stuff we can see and feel. The entitlement, the pathological selfishness, the grandiosity, the arrogance, the status-seeking, manipulation, gaslighting, control, dominance, vindictiveness. And that makes sense because it's the stuff that affects us. The next question I get, if I manage to dodge that good old red flag conversation, which often doesn't get us very far, is the why. Why, Dr. RAMANI? Why was my mother, my father, my spouse, my best friend like this? Why is my sister like this? Why is my ex-boyfriend like this? And even the why is a complicated question. This is a developmental issue, stuff that consistently happened as they grew up. And there are many pathways into what makes anyone's personality their personality. Many narcissistic folks have had adversity in their childhood, trauma, neglect, abuse, chaos, and sometimes the adversity took place in materially comfortable homes with money, a powerful parent, a swimming pool in the backyard, flashy birthday parties, but parents who only attended to the child as an object and only when it was convenient for them. That's still adversity. Or it was an overly indulgent parent or parents who sold the child on an empty narrative of how they're more special than any other child and can do no wrong. But those parents were still not emotionally available and would go dark on the child if the child did not show up the way that those parents wanted. The fork in the road relates to issues including temperament. One child growing up under these conditions may have a temperament that sets up a pathway to narcissism and a lifetime of antagonism. The other child may have a temperament that sets up a pathway to maybe agreeableness and a lifetime of fawn responses and being overly flexible, maybe even anxious about what other people want. And this takes us to this underbelly of narcissism. It's the fuel that drives narcissism, which is the insecurity, the fragile ego, and the shame, and frankly, the fear of being ordinary. These things matter because these are the things that are the most difficult to address. These things are like open wounds for the narcissistic person, and if they get touched, just like with an open wound, a person flinches or gets mad about the pain. This can happen in therapy with a narcissistic client if we go in too fast or call out problem behaviors or even over-empathize with the narcissistic client's pain or vulnerability. This underbelly is like a raw wound, and if we touch it, there will be rage. This underbelly is messy for everyone involved, not just the narcissistic people, but the people in relationships with them. For the narcissistic person, it is something they are not in touch with. They can't name it. They have pushed it out of awareness. So instead of being able to step back and say, okay, I am overreacting because this is an old wound for me, or my need to be special is an offset to my fragile sense of self, so the criticism is hard for me. Listen, that is not going to happen. When the shame gets evoked for a narcissistic person, there's either overt rage or passive aggression or chaos or retribution. The insecurity means that the grandiose defenses, selfishness, the lack of regard about how other people experience this, and entitlement are drawn even higher and stronger. And the fragile ego means that the narcissistic person always has their fists out, thin-skinned and provocable and almost gunning for a fight if somebody looks at them the wrong way. This also means that for the other person in the relationship, you are managing a person who holds on to delusional beliefs of their specialness. And this is what shows up as selfishness and little care or regard for you, and an overblown sense of their importance in the world and of their needs. They are so special that in some really infantile way, they genuinely believe that you should be able to read their mind, or that you should read their mind, and they should be able to say what they want without any consequence. It means that you are living with someone that can blow at any time because of their fragile ego. The thing you said on Monday that wasn't noticed by them for some reason becomes an insult on Tuesday. And of course, the shame is always there and is often projected onto you. And you are asked things like, why are you such an angry, petty person? And it seems like they're talking about themselves, and that's because they are, but you can't say that to them directly. But the underbelly also pulls for empathy from you, from everyone. We can connect dots that the narcissistic person often cannot for themselves between their early childhood difficulties, their disinterested or disengaged selfish parents, or their cruel, demanding, invalidating parent, or frank abuse. We can see the origin of their underbelly, their shame, their insecurity, their fragile ego. And if this is someone we love, we want to hold space for that. But if we go too hard into that and connect the dots for them, they will also rage. Because when we do that, the implication is that they are vulnerable, that they are weak, that they are not perfect, that their backstory is not perfect. And our willingness to see their story holistically can actually come back to bite us. You may even be able to see their underbelly's origin in trauma and their current behavior as a trauma response. My question to you is, how long are you able to endure being mistreated in a relationship and just keep attributing their behavior towards you to their trauma responses, especially if this narcissistic person is making no attempts to address it? Now, that answer is going to be different for everyone. I get it. But a lot of narcissistic responses in a relationship are often linked to trauma. But understanding doesn't mean that the cruelty stings less. The likelihood or the propensity for narcissistic people to be more aggressive, which has been established by research, ties into this underbelly. Narcissism and aggression are correlated. It is always a fight. The aggression is right under the surface because the shame is always bubbling. They are prepared to be wronged by the world, so even a sideways glance can result in explosive anger. While narcissistic people are exploitative and take advantage of other people, they often perceive that is what is being done to them. And because of that, narcissistic folks will come into interactions assuming that they are being played and react to people as though they are taking advantage of them, even though that is what they are doing to the other person. It gets confusing. Now, retribution and vindictiveness are core to how narcissistic people go through the world, which is why divorces are messy. Business arrangements with narcissistic folks never end well, and lawsuits are aplenty. Life is sort of one big revenge fantasy for narcissistic folks. The retribution and vengeance are a way to take back power that the narcissistic person feels was taken away from them, and to punish people or systems for rejecting them, to dominate. And this aggression shows up everywhere as physical violence, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, bullying, menace, and even online trolling and online abuse. Narcissistic people have a fear of being ordinary. The obsession with winning and status and specialness and getting attention is all part of the underbelly. To be ordinary would be to lose those necessary and protective grandiose defenses. And then the narcissistic person has to sit in the nihilistic state of discomfort and shame and vulnerability. So yes, someone screaming at a server in a restaurant to get served right away, or asking to see the manager in a store, or expecting people to follow rules that they don't follow, it's gross. Or a person so selfish that they expect their needs to always be met first while having little regard for others is ridiculous. All of that is what is seen and experienced in these relationships. But the stuff that gets survivors into trouble is the underbelly, because that becomes the source of the rationalizations and the pity for people who are in these relationships. You might say something like, listen, I get that they're treating me terribly or that they aren't doing the nicest things, but it's their shame, it's their vulnerability, it's their trauma talking. And it is the source of the never-ending bad behavior for the people who are narcissistic. And it is really hard to address. Listen, I think it is important that you do have compassion and empathy for the underbelly, but simultaneously give yourself permission to disengage. Compassion doesn't mean that you have to suffer. Compassion means to see it. You might even feel a little pity or sympathy, perhaps, but you can simultaneously save yourself. Compassion is not sacrifice to the point of self-harm. Compassion is awareness, but still being able to be invested in taking care of yourself. And I am not saying it's easy, because it's not. But that underbelly is what makes narcissism a pretty slippery fish. Thanks again.